This week on Dumb Pitches, my guest is Cory Michaelis, and we get the inside scoop on his podcast about strippers and how that actually was a pretty bad idea in the beginning on his part and on their part to go to a man's hotel room to do a podcast, allegedly. No, that's true. But it may actually turn into what is now a good idea that you can also check out. But here we go. Dumb Pitches.
What a bunch of dumb pitches. Oh my goodness.
Welcome to another episode of Dumb Pitches with Monica Nevi. I'm Monica Nevi, your host. This is the show where we talk to successful people about their worst ideas. I'm very excited for our guest this week. His good friend, hilarious comedian, Cory Michaelis is here. Hello. Yay.
Cory Michael is comedy. How's it going?
Good.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. We've tried a couple of times, and I'm just, it's built up anticipation for what your bad ideas are.
Oh, yeah. Well, do bad ideas on this show sometimes end up being okay ideas in the end?
Yes, and honestly,
that's where I
have a pretty hard time not like supporting you anyways, you know, like even if it is a bad idea, I'm like,
fair.
all right, what if we do this? So that's good. But we do like to start with your good ideas, your credits, so people know you haven't had only bad ideas. So
That's
Cory
fair.
Michaelis, you have a dry bar special that has 75 million views, something like that.
I mean, that's a stretch, but yes, that's true. That's what I say
You know
to
what?
convince people to book me.
We're not going to do a background check on that. So that's
All right,
fine. You have a dry bar special.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's called Bad Teacher
Yes. Album that went number 2.
on iTunes and Billboard. The only album released that week. Pretty cool.
You have a couple podcasts. You have a podcast called Homeschool. Is that right? Homeschool.
That's right, with a K
Yes.
in school. And
a podcast called Stripper Whisperer.
That's actually the bad idea we're going to talk about
Oh, really?
today.
Oh, good. Yay. Well, good, because I actually have kind of a story about your podcast. So,
Oh boy, here we go.
Yes. Also, you produce some great theater shows in Everett, Washington, where you're from, and I do
That's
think
the
we
hometown, yeah.
bond a little bit over being from places in Washington that people are like, ugh.
Really? You want to go there?
Yeah, you're from Everett.
Yes,
and I'm
it
from Renton.
deserves
Yes.
cool stuff.
Yeah. Which, don't you have another one coming up soon that people can?
Yeah, so we're going to have the next one next Friday, April 15th, with Tommy Ryman and Kermit Apio co-headlining.
Nice.
Very excited about that. And then technically I'm co-producing the one that you'll be on Friday, May 6th with Mr. D, Joe Dombrowski. So I'll be there hosting that one as well.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, get tickets to those both of them. Get tickets to both of those shows.
EverettComedy.com.
Nice. Perfect. So you've had good ideas.
Couple.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So let's get into it. What did you think of your bad idea?
Well, so I was married for a minute, like 10 years.
Just
and
like a quick minute.
There's my bad idea. Then divorce was the great idea. No, and when I became a single fella on the road doing comedy, I was like, I'll go to some strip clubs and hang out there at night occasionally, for a number of reasons. Mostly because I'd never dated before anybody in my entire life.
Had you ever been to a strip club like while you were married?
We had been together in Las Vegas and had a good time. I think that was part of one of the handful of things we did to be like, well, maybe we need a little spice in the,
Got it, yeah.
And in fact, one time we were like texting the next day with one of the strippers from the club. It was a very funny thing of like, guys have a hard time understanding that the strippers are they're acting a little bit, a lot sometimes, most of the time. But it was funny because me and my wife at the time were like, I think maybe she wants to hang out with us later.
I
We
mean, a phone
texted her.
number is pretty, being able to
It
text, that's
is.
still a step in the in
It
right,
is.
wrong direction. I don't know. It's a step.
Towards something. Maybe she, I think, was probably doing a thing of like, come back tomorrow night while you're
Right.
in town and pay me
Yeah.
more money.
Uh-huh.
But, we tossed it out there. Hey, want to come to Cory's show? And she said, no, thanks. After work is what she said,
Yeah.
which is true
Yeah.
and also a nice way to let us down. But, and then I had gone like in this sort of interim where we were together still, but weren't really we knew we weren't going to be together, but we hadn't told people. And so we were still living together. And I went on the road quite a bit during that like 8-month time frame and went to one in Boise. And anyway, they don't take all their clothes off in Boise, but they do nice, excellent lap dances. I will say. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
And
so
anyway,
so
I've been to a few.
Got it. Before you were single.
And I didn't know how to talk to women outside the context of being married, and being married, it's so easy to, just be relatively charming, I think, because they all know her. She's usually there, there's no sex isn't an option. It's just a nice conversation with a person. And then you take that away and put sex on the table. And I'm like, oh, geez, I don't think I know how to do this. So maybe if I was able to talk to women who are paid to talk to me,
You practice? Is that kind of the
little practice? And I literally that was sort of a part of the mindset, but also fun night out when you're on the road. Anyway, what I thought was, as far as I could tell, the women that worked in strip clubs were pretty similar to the women I met that didn't work in strip clubs in terms of just like, I don't know, promiscuity, about similar, it seemed to me. More sober probably than most of the women I met that weren't in strip clubs, and more defined relationships as far as I could tell. Like they knew that they were like, I'm with this one person, and whether that be a man or a woman, or I'm in an open thing, or I'm with two people, and I was like, why do we talk so much shit about strippers? Like, what's the deal there? And they have a very similar job to us as stand-up comics. They're doing an act at night, out late, spend their days doing other things.
for drunk people and
drunk people, relying on those drunk people to behave themselves, hopefully.
Yeah.
And
need security.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like, how about this idea? How about a straight white single fella interview strippers for a podcast, which initially sounds like, okay, that's not bad. But getting those interviews initially was very, very difficult, because not only do they not know me?
Right.
I'm either sliding into a DM on Instagram or I'm asking them in person at a strip club. And I had to bank up interviews, right? So I had no link to send them to be like, here's what I do. There was no cover art yet. It didn't, as far as the world was concerned.
Like, here's an example, because you didn't have one yet. Yeah, that's fair.
As far as the world was concerned, this podcast did not exist. It was not a thing. And I was walking into strip clubs going, so, hey, I got this podcast that I have. Would love for you to do it.
Like, we've heard
it's
this
in my
one
hotel
before.
room.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, do we get there in your van with candy in it? And I'm like, no, it's real, I promise. And they're like, well, what's it called? And I was like, well, I think I'm going to call it Stripper Whisperer. And they're like, oh, that's charming. And like, also, what do you mean you think you're going to call it that? Well, I haven't released any yet. Oh, okay. So I can't even listen to it or find it on the internet anywhere. And shockingly, the first interview I did was with a friend. So that, kind of worked out. That was okay. And then the next 10 were very difficult to get. I went to a woman's house in Portland with her kids' toys on the floor in her living room. And I just can't imagine. I haven't talked to her since releasing it, couple years ago, but she must have just been like, this is very dangerous. Why did I do this? This is such a dumb idea. Um, the big thing that helped was Elle Stanger, who's like a super pop. She goes by stripper writer on Instagram and other things. She was recommended to me by a close friend, and I don't remember how that co-signage helped her decide to do it, but she came to a hotel that I was staying in Portland, did the podcast, and was like, you know what? And she's like a sex coach, and she sells sex online a little bit with her partner, and so she was like, I have groups that I'm in online, and this is good.
Just gonna like
This
say that you're okay, and
Yeah.
then did that help get more people? Okay,
so I had
cool.
a bunch of interviews through her, and that allowed me to release the first season, which then allowed me to go, hey, look, it's a real thing, I promise.
Yeah, here's an example for once.
And she, even though she wasn't the first interview chronologically that I did, but she was the first interview I released, so that helped.
Yeah.
They listen, they go, oh, I follow her on, like, I know who that is.
Yeah,
she's
that's
kind
a
of
good
famous in the world. And I would send her texts occasionally like, hey, I was thinking about asking this question. Is that like, because I'm not trying to be like Captain Save a Stripper here. Like, who am I? Like, and it's probably better. A stripper would probably be the better person to do these interviews, right?
Fair. Yeah.
But I had the idea, so screw you guys.
Well, but I think it is a like, yeah, that would be an interesting podcast to listen to strippers talk to each other about things that they already know about. But for the accessibility of like, hey, we're trying to show you parts of this that you wouldn't have thought of if they're like, oh, it's two strippers, I don't know, I'm not involved in that. But if you're like, I'm a regular guy talking to strippers, you're a regular guy, right? Now let's get to know them besides their buttholes or whatever.
Yes, exactly. So I lean, and a lot. That's so funny you say buttholes, because just in general, it's a funny word, but because a number have been like, I can't do that. I can't talk on a podcast. That's too awkward and embarrassing, and I'm too anxious about that. And I was like, you literally show the entire whole of your ass to humans close up
You're
every
like,
night.
but talking, no.
And that's fine, but I mean, switch it. Like, we can do this all day long.
Fair,
we do it all day long. We do it every night. And
pants on, yeah.
Yes, I'm not showing my butthole to anybody. So I guess, it's to each, not their own, but more to each whatever they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
But
which is an interesting, that's interesting to think about, though, the psychology of that. So
totally. And one was like, just asking her made her like anxious. I could tell. It was really, really interesting. But so ultimately, you're right. I lean a little bit into, hey, tell me about what it's like. Like, I don't know. I'm a dumb guy who just goes to these clubs and sometimes has some misconceptions, and right my wrongs.
Yeah.
Tell me. Yeah.
When you and I had first talked about you doing this podcast, there was a lot of like, I want to be a good patron and I want other people to do, like, what should we absolutely not do? What do you like? What are you okay with? Those types of things. Just from a respect standpoint, which I think was at least a nice intention.
Yeah.
The more you're talking about this, the more I'm realizing it is a bad idea on their part, their part to be like, yeah, I'll go to this guy's hotel room and do. It just sounds like another, like trick, being like, hey, you want to come do my podcast, so it helped that it could be shared amongst the community as like, this guy's okay. But you're right, of you being like, it was so hard to get them to do it. Well, it's like, yeah, they've heard every line to get them to do something. You're like, well, what about my podcast? Yeah, it doesn't exist yet, but I'm thinking of starting a podcast.
Hilarious. Your next episode is going to be that woman that invited me to her house with her kid there. Like, hey, you have any dumb ideas? She's like, I don't think so. And you're like, well, how about this one? I know of one. So yeah, the tagline essentially is, what's it like to work in the clubs? What's your life like outside of the club, and how can we all be better customers in your space?
When I think There was a lot of stuff. So we were working together in Boise, and there's a comedy condo, a nice one actually, that
Yeah.
we were both staying at. That's what, there's rooms for everybody, much like Cory's in right now, if you don't know.
Yes,
And
I'm 100% in a comedy condo.
and
Apparently,
you,
we left that one dirty. I don't.
oh yeah, I don't
Somehow
know.
I don't remember how
Anyways,
that happened. But anyway.
you did 2 interviews
Oh, that's right.
there, while I was there, which was really different interviews too, if I could, which I thought was an interesting
Yes.
aspect, because one was a sober person who really had a lot of insight, and she ended up coming to our shows, and she was very nice, and a lot of insight into, because she'd been doing it for quite a while and different stuff, and just very professional about it too, which I
Yeah.
think people wouldn't be a stereotype you would think. And then
Yeah.
the other person was clearly in a different place in life.
Okay, so
Not
we'll
sober.
talk about that. Not sober.
Yeah.
Not sober that morning.
Yes. Yeah.
And we can talk about this because we're not going to, well, a couple reasons we can talk about this. And this has happened. Well, here, this speaks to the dumb pitches part, right? Part of the idea at the beginning of the podcast for the interview. So I did 3 that week, actually. One after I think you maybe had left town already.
I left pretty early on, I think,
yeah.
but
And she came over that, and she has become a friend. She's great. And we're going to do a second interview with her here soon.
Nice.
I think. The other is awesome. She's come to every show I've ever done in Boise, and she's great, and brought her boyfriend every time. I think a different boyfriend, but they all look the same. It's interesting. And the other gal who kind of hung out a bit, and I think might have been part of the source of the not cleaning up, only because she was kind of smoking a bit on that patio.
Yeah.
And I don't.
But there was a friend with her too. She was also smoking. There was a lot of cigarettes.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, anyway, regardless, she asked me to not ever release that podcast.
Is that the only time that happened, or were there other episodes?
No.
Really? Okay.
We're at about six right now,
You've
which
done
is
6
real
interviews
tough.
where they're like, "Don't release this." That's a lot
Yeah.
of time, not to be. I mean, we've had to cut stuff out,
Sure.
even on this, of people just mentioning names or whatever that they probably shouldn't have. But for the whole thing to be like, you can't use it at all, and
when it's already hard to get them.
Yeah. Oh wow.
But this is partly my fault, because 3 from memory, 3 of them at least were the person felt like they had a little bit too much to drink.
Oh wow, they were
and said things that they shouldn't have.
Okay.
And I opened the podcast with sort of jokingly taking a shot. I mean, I take a shot, but hey, I need this. Well, I need this. The joke, whatever. The bit is like, I need the liquid courage to even talk to you guys. Like,
right, I understand. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and then they join sometimes or don't. So one time was Vancouver. We both took a shot. We kept taking them, and she said a few things about the club she worked in, or club she used to work in, and she's like, and I was like, I think I can cut it. We didn't say your name. I won't post. So anonymity is complete. You can have 100% anonymity. You can, except for disguising their voice. I don't have to post a photo. I don't have to post video of it.
Yeah.
And they typically say their stage name anyhow. They could fake their stage name. Who cares? It's just, whatever. But so that was one that was a real bummer. And then the gal in Boise was sort of fine, because she was she was drunk to the point that it wasn't a great representation probably of her as a person, and strippers in general. And she knew that. And so that was, she had a rough day. She had a real rough day that day. And I think she's doing great now. Good. I don't think she's dancing anymore. And I'm disconnected with her on social media now, I think, because I think she just kind of was like, I'm going to bounce off social media and not do that. And then there was one that was like 2 women in Vancouver again, actually, where New Westminster, where that club is, roommates came over, and they were great. It was like such a good interview, and they thought they sounded dumb and sounded like idiots, and we don't. Oh my gosh, we sound ditzy and stupid. And
Oh, well,
I
that
was like,
one's
no,
disappointing.
you.
You're like, oh,
I
this is
thought
good.
you were. And then one guy was like, all right, if you, I'll fly anywhere. Here's the deal. If you take it down, I'll fly anywhere in the states that you're going to be performing, and I'll redo the interview with you. And I was like, that is not going to
Well, yeah, it sounds like
happen. I
unnecessary,
mean,
but okay.
well, yeah, and that's a little much. And like, what now? What do we? But she's like, well, no, I just want to visit the States. And so
Oh,
let's look at your calendar. I'll pick a cool city.
you're like, how about Everett?
I'll go on vacation. And yeah, exactly. You just drive 2 hours to
Yeah.
my, and I don't have to go anywhere. And then it of course never happened. And then pandemic and things. But now she lives near Spokane. So there's a chance I might get to interview her when I go to Spokane sometime. But so yeah, so like pandemic hits, right? And it's like, well, there maybe go. Well, first I was like, the podcast might be over. It's really hard to get these interviews. I did
Maybe go
seasons
strip
because I
clubs all
just,
together. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just, there's not a lot of Seattle. It's just Seattle strip clubs are so strict
Mm-hmm.
anyway that like I've not even interviewed anyone in a Seattle club yet. Only like a bikini barista that lives near Seattle. And what was it? I got to the point for the first season where I was interviewing comedians about their experiences in the strip club
Mm.
and like calling it a bonus or calling it like the champagne room
Yeah.
with
Oh,
Andrew
oh,
Rivers or
the
whatever,
champagne room. Yeah.
and just kind of trying to get some episodes out. And then I realized, all right, we're just gonna have to call it. Season one's over. Woohoo, great. And then how did it play out? I don't remember exactly, but here's what happened. Pandemic hits, and I go, wait a second. We might be able to, people are adept at Zoom. That's way less intrusive.
Yeah.
I can slide into DMs on Instagram with either either account and be like, hey, here's what to do, tossing it out there. I just started with people who already followed the podcast who appeared to be strippers or sex workers,
Mm-hmm.
and then a gal who's really cool who lives in Northern California, works in Bend, was like, have you ever thought about having a co-host? And I was like, it just seems like a lot of coordinating,
Yeah.
I would love to, but and she's like, how about this? Let's give it a go. You interview me, I'll start doing the booking for you, I'll start setting all that up. That'll take that off your plate. It'll be,
Yeah.
and it'll be so much easier for me to book. I can start with people I know. We'll go from there and see what happens. And we've done like 10 interviews in the last few months, and she's great. And she works hard and super responsible, and more so than me. And so we're gonna have another season where it's gonna be her and I interviewing, and that hopefully will be the future
That is okay.
of
So it
the
sounds,
podcast.
yeah, it sounds like it's getting to a point where you're like, oh, this is a but because then having her with some experience and you being more the link to like the outsider that wants to know, whatever, makes the interviewee feel more comfortable, but also is, that a link to the outside as well. And it sounds like this was a bad idea that you really just didn't give up on. And so now as it's
Unlike my
gotten
marriage.
as it's gotten more and more, you're like, actually, they might be figuring it out now. No, it is such an interesting, and I've listened to the episodes. They are really interesting, and it's a fun, and you hear crazy stories and stuff that you wouldn't think
Yeah.
of, or parts of that industry that you wouldn't think of, whatever. And so it is a good idea, and it's like maybe you're just so invested in really getting these stories out that you just stuck with
Well,
it.
maybe that's what my marriage needed, was to bring a stripper in as a a co-host to
Co-husband
the
or whatever,
marriage.
yeah.
But so yeah,
Well, it
I
sounds
think
like
that
you tried at some point,
that
but
we did try once in Vegas. I think that yeah, it's so much better now, and it's a better podcast now, as long as we can kind of navigate that. She's a performer on stage, not necessarily a speaker, but she's quite good at it, and it's fun little like. There are times when I'm like, hey, you guys take it from here. Like, and one of the things that was this is part of the dumb pitch part too, but I learned quickly was that they don't, they like that last piece or the last two pieces. What's my life like? How can we be good customers?
Yeah.
That's the part they want to talk about. The part about like what's it like in the clubs,
Right. What
can
are
get
creepy
very,
dudes like? Yeah.
yeah. So I have to like to not come off as just another one of those guys, or that my listeners, whoever they are like that. The phrasing of the questions I learned really quickly needed to be not what's the craziest thing you've ever done in a club.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't, And
Right.
so I phrase it, what's the craziest thing someone has asked you to do in the club? Couple things happen there. One, it's on that person now, that's
Yeah.
their thing. And they don't have to say if they did or did not do it. That's
Yeah.
totally up
That's
to
a good.
them.
Yeah.
And then we can get some of those stories without feeling like I'm trivializing, or there's
Or
another
they're
word
like
that's better
admitting
for that.
something that might be embarrassing or something. It's
That's
just,
right.
yeah, that they're in control of what happens next.
Yep.
That's good.
And I
That's
give them a list of questions that I typically ask in advance in preparation for that. Say things like, hey, what's off limits here? Also, what name should we call you? Do you want to share any of your social handles? And we have anywhere from women who are like, I want to promote everything that I've ever
right.
done. Please follow me on all the things. Go to my OnlyFans, look at my butthole, pay me for it. To, hey, I just kind of want to I just want to be pretty anonymous. To, I don't want you to even post it ever.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You do have the entire spectrum of guests here. So okay. So the new ones will be coming out. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. So
That's
we
great.
don't have a scheduled date yet, but I think we probably could start now. We bank them because it's just so hard. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
even with her help and
Well, I like
everything,
this
and
seasons idea too, especially
right,
from this standpoint. Like I actually considered doing seasons for this one, and it would have been easier, but because it's people like I would just keep going, and then most of the time I'm like, oh, I should just do a bunch and then not have to worry about it for a while,
right.
which is great. But it sounds like okay. So well, first of all, where can people follow you and stuff like that so they can come to your shows and things like
Yeah. Cory Michael is comedy. I'm gonna start saying it. Cory Michaelis comedy on all of the things, Instagram and like Facebook fan page. Probably best to find out where I'm gonna be performing. EverettComedy.com for that local show. So stripper podcast on
Okay.
Instagram has a decent amount of followers, and that is so it's on all the things except for I tried to find it on somebody's phone the other night on Google
Google Play or something.
Podcasts or
Yeah.
Google Play, and it wasn't on there. So I'm probably making a mistake somewhere on the back end. I'm really bad, but I use Anchor. I don't know what you guys use, but I use Anchor, and I thought it just went everywhere. But maybe I need to do some work on that. And if you want to be on the podcast, if you've done anything
Oh yeah.
in the sex work industry, OnlyFans only, which a lot of people have picked up in the last few years. It's not. We interviewed a man this season who's a stripper. It was very fun and a very different experience than women.
Yeah.
I haven't, and I've interviewed, or I've asked to interview someone who strips for almost primarily fitness reasons. Someone got mad who was a stripper that I interviewed a bikini barista. It's not the same. That's not what I was like, no, it's similar. And also this is not,
Right. We're not excluding
I
people. Yeah.
not exclusive. And I can't be picky. I got anyone who has ever taken off a piece of clothing and made money. I am happy to interview and yeah, we do it mostly via Zoom with my co-host. I should at She Is Tattooed
She is
on
tattooed.
Instagram. She
All
goes
right.
by Nikki. She's awesome and fun to connect with. She works out of Bend, Oregon at a strip club in Stars Cabaret in Bend.
Oh, nice.
yeah, so it's now it's become sort of a like, okay, we got a
I feel
thing,
like this is the
got
perfect
some
time to tell us all about it,
seasons.
because now it seems like it's on. It's shifting into the good idea here.
That's
So
right.
this is perfect. Now our audience can go and find it, and now that they've heard the whole backstory, they can kind of compare. Go back,
That's
listen to
right.
season 1, compare some of the interviews there to what we're moving forward with, and see if Nikki really is making it much better for you.
Yeah, we'll release. Why don't we just? I'll just set a release date to make myself do it. But late April, we're gonna release season
There you
3.
go, late
There it
April.
is. I think we have two. I have 2 seasons out that I did all on my own.
Oh,
And
perfect. Well, there you go.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I see. This is the thing of like, and if anybody is a comic, it doesn't have to be a comic, but I think that's a fun idea too of having bonus episodes that are like, tell me a quick story of your experience in a strip club.
I'd be happy to
And
do it.
so I'll have Monica on
Yeah,
for that,
there you go.
maybe in season 3.
Yay. Nice. Okay, well, good. Well, this was fun. And I learned a lot about, I feel like, an idea that I already knew about, but and it made me think about from their perspective. Why I'm just happy that you ever even got somebody to say yes to it.
I know, right? How
Yeah.
charming must I be to know? But yeah, also this is funny because like I wish maybe I just need to create an episode that's pinned at the top somehow that is this. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, like
because
explaining kind of what.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I used to teach high school, so I know I'm sure that there are people who are like, ugh, fucking does comedy now and interviews strippers.
Right. Now he
What
wants
a
to do all the dirty
douche.
stuff. Went
And my
from.
mom, she's not a fan of it at all.
I'm
But
sure.
what are you gonna
Well,
do?
don't listen to it then.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, just because you used to work. I'm just kidding. Yeah. But hey, she, what's funny is exactly like strippers do a lot of them, which is like purposely naive, like their families. Like they'll
Oh,
say things
right.
like, I bartend at a strip club, and their mom and dad are
Right.
like,
Like,
got it.
yeah.
Let's never talk about it.
Yep.
And
You're
then
just
that's kind of what
bartending.
it is with my mom. I'm like, I have a podcast. And she's like, that's right. I remember. And then we move on with Andrew. And I'm like, right, with Andrew,
Yep, that
homeschool.
one.
You got
Sure.
it.
Well, that's great. Well, good. I'm glad you were able to come on finally. And
Me too.
everybody follow and follow the stripper podcast so that you can see when this next season comes out.
Yeah.
And then here, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, join our YouTube memberships if you want the behind the scenes stuff or the episodes a day early. And then if you're listening, just rate and review, subscribe. And we are on YouTube if you are listening and you want to see what Cory looks like. That's fun. But right now, you can just keep watching Dumb Pitches.
You're weird.
Yes.